right, great. Looks like we have everyone rolling in. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We have our team THEA here, as well as our team from Rice University, and they'll be giving a presentation shortly. So thank you very much for joining us. Hello, hello. Hi, Bridget. We appreciate you guys taking time tonight.
Do I start, Christine, or?
You can go ahead and get started.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Christine, for introducing us. I'm Amelin, a researcher at Rice University and a former Wortham Fellow. My team here today presenting this Uneven Runoff Project is Ray Atkinson, also from Rice, and Mike Wisner, who's a geographer in Baltimore. And you'll hear from us throughout the evening, and we'll try to keep it to kind of 30 to 40 minutes so that we have some time at the end to hear your thoughts and have a bit of a discussion. So maybe we can just jump right in and see how we go. Mike, you mind screen sharing? Can you see that? Okay,
got it.
Great. So really just to briefly begin, the project is called Uneven Runoff. We've started thinking about industrial pollution and flood risk in Houston and looking across Harris County at the county level, but also zooming in on neighborhoods that are of specific interest to you and THEA. And so we spoke with some of you in the last couple of months, and we've discussed specific areas around San Jacinto River, Cypress, Jones Road, and the 5th Ward. And we'll be sharing some of those detailed kind of context studies tonight as well. But we just want to let you know before we start that this is a public web map. And so what we'll do after we run through the story map, as we scroll down, at the end, we'll show you the link, and what you can do is go in and actually zoom in and interact with the map on your own. All right, well, maybe we can get started. So the project really was started looking at kind of the inequality of how water hits the ground in Harris County in Houston, and it's not neutral. It doesn't kind of flow the way it should, largely because of like the kind of impervious surfaces that have covered Houston over time. That means water can't infiltrate into the ground. So this is a map showing the layers of impervious surface. Anything above 50% impervious surface could be concrete or asphalt, roadway, or driveways, anything like that are considered impervious. And so you can see here, it really covers a great portion of the city. You continue scrolling. On top of that, as you may well know, there's a flood risk. And I don't know if the map turns on the Fema floodplains, but yeah, I don't know if I'm seeing that. Sorry. Yeah, there it is. So there's this kind of precarious watershed and flood risks that are laid across this, fairly impervious city, which increases, of course, the risks of runoff into these waterways and flooding into homes and things like that. So we started to gather this data. You keep scrolling, you'll see that the Fema floodplains are also kind of coalescing with, we've overlaid where the industrial properties are. So this is across the entire Harris County. The yellow is industrial in classification. And if you scroll down one more, you can see that even the FEMA floodplains were not enough. So that this is a kind of simulation done by researchers on Hurricane Harvey and where the flood extents of Harvey was. And so you'll start to see these maps again as we go through the story. But yeah, it basically trying to say that it's not as simple as we think. Like water may flood in places that are incredibly toxic. So yeah, you can keep scrolling. And I might pass this point to Ray.
Yeah, so building off that idea of toxicity and how that interacts with the water releases and the flooding, we looked at two different types of toxic sites, which the text that we just went through explains in more detail if you want to read that when you're looking at this on your own. But those include toxic release inventory sites and Superfund sites, both of which are tracked by the EPA and both of which we've mapped here. So this is a time animation that shows over the years since 1987, the amounts of chemicals that have been released from those toxic release inventory sites. That's an annual tracking program from active chemical releases. And this is any kind of chemical released to any media, whether that's air, water, into the ground, anything like that. The red dots and the hollow red outlined points are Superfund sites, which are mostly reported by the EPA, although Texas also has its own set of state-only Superfund sites. So we've included those as well. And those are more relic sites, so formerly toxic sites that are still contributing toxicity to the environment. And so some of those red points, you'll see them become hollow over time in this animation as they're removed from the list of concerns. But even after they've been removed, many of them continue to pose concerns for their local communities. So this is one of the mini maps in our presentation that when you go through it on your own time, you'll be able to zoom in and out, and you can pause the time slider on a specific year. You can click on the dots to see how much of a release was given, what the facility's name is. Yeah, Mike's giving a preview of that kind of thing. So hopefully this will help provide some interesting information going forward.
And just to footnote there, I think we have data from 1987 to 2019, which is all the records that the EPA have put out on these toxic release inventory sites, or TRI sites, which are in the yellow and the gray. So then we started looking at Superfund sites, as this was a kind of a top of mind concern for residents that we spoke with many of you. And so as a kind of overview of Harris County, there are 25 historic Superfund sites, which when you look at it all on one page, it's actually significant. Some have been removed from the federal or state registers, but there are, if you scroll down, Mike, the ones highlighted red are still active. And so you might know some of these sites really well. There's 14 sites that are current Superfunds in Harris County. I've listed here, and you can go look more closely, the names of the sites, how long they've been on the register, EPA, National Priorities List, NPL, or I've written TCEQ, which is the Texas Environmental Quality Board, which is the state register. I've also listed what the former waste, the former industrial use was, and we've included some of the top toxins. And Carolyn, I just saw your question in the chat. The year range for the active toxic sites, and also the Superfund sites, because that's when the EPA started the programs to track these toxic sites, was like 1986, 1987. So we have data in those interactive maps you saw earlier so for like a 30-year period between 1987 and 2019, which is the latest information. Okay, so here we've started to overlay the FEMA flood risks again, the 1% and 0.2% annual chance floodplains. And you can see that these are incredibly, toxic former industrial sites, and yet a bunch of them are in the 100-year floodplain, right? And that's a concern, of course. And if you scroll down, what is actually more concerning is that the Hurricane Harvey flood model that actually simulated what Hurricane Harvey extents were covers way more sites than the FEMA sites, that the FEMA floodplains did. So here you see most of them have some kind of flood risk associated with it. So that's a kind of concern across the board.
So here we have, oh, are we there yet or not? Sorry. Sometimes I'll go ahead and say this for the user's sake. Sometimes, especially if multiple people are looking at this story map, you'll get a few glitches. And if that happens, just refresh the page and it should sort out the kinks. But bear with us. So this is another interactive web map with a time slider, also showing TRI releases. So it's like the one that we looked at before in yellow, except that in this case, we're only showing releases directly to water. So the TRI reporting tells us which chemicals were released, whether they're carcinogenic or not, what water bodies they're released to, and how much of those chemicals were released. And so that's what we're animating here. I think I forgot to mention this on the other, but when the bubbles are filled in solid color, that means that the release contained some amount of a carcinogenic chemical, and that applies to the earlier map in yellow that we looked at. So again, you'll be able to zoom in and click on these and learn more about them. But just going through this time animation, you can see that there are some persistent releases, facilities that are releasing substantial amounts of chemicals every year, year after year. You can go to the next one, Mike.
And it might be worth noting that the pink filled bubbles are releases with carcinogenic content. And so that's something you can click on and see how many pounds of carcinogens were part of this particular reporting year. Right. Yeah, exactly.
So on the next one, we have aggregated those chemical releases from the data we were just looking at. We've aggregated it by the water bodies that are collecting those releases. This is over the entire period of time. So the darker fuchsia has the highest numbers of releases, and it's measured in pounds. And so this one that Mike has clicked on has had over 3 million pounds of chemicals released to this segment of the Houston Ship Channel since 1987.
So basically, every time you see magenta, fuchsia on our maps, that usually represents higher toxicity.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's kind of, we're trying to look at the data different ways, because quite often you can download all this public data from the EPA in spreadsheets, and it's hard to know what to do with it or how to read it. So my GIS expert colleagues here have turned them into maps, so it's become spatial, and you can actually look at the waterways and say, hey, I live next to this bayou and so on, and look and search from there. So this is a kind of spreadsheet which we've appended. You can click on it to scroll through it. It's basically a summary of the total releases to any bayou in Harris County or creek or water body. And it tells you so it's organized by the highest, it's organized by alphabetical order. So you can go down to San Jacinto River, for example, and look at what's been released actively into that river since, and this is a cumulative number. So this is like since 1987. And all the names of the facilities we've kept in this spreadsheet. And we've kept a column that shows how much of the release is carcinogenic in pounds. and how much of the release went into the stormwater, right? So exactly, so you can search for your river and see kind of what the biggest chemical was basically that went into it. Yeah, so this basically corresponds to the bubbles that you were seeing on the map. Great. So I think by now you can see that most of our map is pretty interactive.
Yeah, so in this section, we wanted to kind of highlight some of the demographic patterns because, you know, in the end, this is about people, right? And there's a lot of people in Houston, of course, as you all know, right? So this first variable that we're looking at is called the Social Vulnerability Index, and it was created by the CDC and combines a bunch of variables that are listed out here. Socioeconomic status, income, minority status, disability, housing type, and et cetera. And the darker red is just a higher social vulnerability. And there's clear patterns that you can see here across Harris County and Houston itself, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with these patterns. And these are represented at census tract levels, which is a census boundary that a lot of people aren't familiar with in kind of real life, but like we said, you'll be able to zoom in and explore yourself once we provide the links. So the green variable is representing median home value, and there's a clear cluster of higher home values in the southwest of Houston and Harris County. And we've highlighted the Superfund sites and the communities we're gonna highlight as well here. And this one shows cancer prevalence. The data here is not age adjusted, which will skew it to areas with a larger proportion of elderly folks, which is why we think there's a larger cluster here in the Southwest where the median home values are higher, because we think there's just a larger proportion of elderly folks there. So we're working to get the age-adjusted values, and I think THEA is doing some work on getting higher resolution cancer information as well. So that's one where we're displaying the data that we have, even though we know it's imperfect. We did get data on drainage types. It took a bit of work to get, but this shows it's just a binary of open ditch drainage versus curb and gutter infrastructure. And the darker blue is the open ditch drainage. So we'll zoom in a little bit to see it better. And there's also clear patterns that follow the other patterns that we were looking at here, that, you know, very much the north and east side of the city has a lot of the ditch drainage. And if you recall back to some of where the toxic releases were happening, they do overlap substantially.
Yeah, I might jump in here too to say, and you can see on most of these maps, we've kept the Superfund sites in red and the dots, and the kind of small circles are the TRI sites. And this really is just to say that drainage infrastructure is also an inequality in the city. And you know, we were reading publications by like Texas Houses, who actually took pictures of some of these differences between the curb and gutter drainage and the open ditch drainage, and we'll go into it a little bit further. If you scroll, we'll look at what this might actually look like in a kind of the section view of a street. And this is not any specific street, but this is kind of like showing what the curb and gutter drainage does versus the open ditch. So here we've kind of drawn a kind of relatively affluent neighborhood with curb and gutter ditches. that's an image of a street in Montrose with that inlet. And what this kind of drainage does is it, if you scroll down, and when it rains, most of the water goes underground, right? And it gets retained in under the curb, for example, and into a stormwater channel. And so things like debris or trash don't accumulate in the drain. And you know, this is a kind of the binary of the like one type of drainage. The other type of drainage that we see and open ditches, and we do understand that there are, yes, thanks so much, Susan, for the comment. I think open ditches can also have, I've also been told, and I've heard that many people do appreciate open ditches for what they do. This is a kind of reflection on the discussion we had with residents from the 5th Ward, as well as Barrett Crosby, when we were talking about the ditches. And so maybe this reflects a very specific kind of context of the ditches. And so in this situation, it's kind of an open system, usually grassed. And what happens when it rains is that the water flows into, if you scroll down, into the channels that run by homes, the kind of underlying soil that most of Houston, kind of mid-South Houston has, is a kind of more clay-rich soil, which has higher kind of impermeability. And so that creates maybe a bit more of a difficult situation for water, just generally in terms of Houston soils. And so the question around the ditches really arose, I think, in these specific neighborhoods when we were speaking with residents about trash and debris that gathered in these ditches that reduce the flow and affect it. So this is quite a, I guess, neighborhood specific comment about the ditches. And what we found here was that the ditches, some residents said that it wasn't being maintained enough by the city, cleaned, I mean. I think they mentioned that the ditches may get cleaned once every 10 years. And then the next slide, if you kind of move forward, there has, I think, also been a persistent issue in the 5th Ward with illegal dumping. And so this has been a kind of question of it's debris coming from outside and what that may do to the kind of drainage channel, particularly if this is the only kind of form of drainage. You can keep scrolling, Mike, if you'd like. And these are just some more kind of quotes reflecting on the kind of what people remember about the ditches, and especially in the areas that we spoke with Crosby Barrett, where there were many kind of micro industries that we heard next to residences that share the ditches as well. So there was that kind of open question about what might be in some of the water in the ditches, particularly if you're sited next to an industrial facility. But we do appreciate the comments, and I think that these are, you know, incredibly valid as well, depending on the context. And yeah, I think we were speaking specifically to the feedback that we got from some residents in the first meeting. But thank you, we really appreciate the comments too.
Yeah, thanks. So we're gonna kind of zoom into a couple of these neighborhoods that we're highlighting here that with folks that we did speak to. And the first one is along the San Jacinto River. So this area, kind of the folks we spoke with covered everywhere from Channelview to Crosby down to Baytown, and this is a closer look at that area. Here you see the Superfund sites, and along the river we're looking at when we're looking at land use or land cover, you can see that the industry starts to come and the development starts to come right up to the edge of the water, the further south that you go along the river, even though there's still plenty of green space and open space that people are using to for various uses of recreation and so on. We did identify 4 Superfund sites within 1.5 miles of the waterway, which is this kind of buffer area that we're showing. And the 45 TRI sites have discharged chemicals into the river, but each year is not even, right? Because in 2019 alone, there were almost 1 million pounds of chemicals discharged into the San Jacinto River, anywhere between Lake Houston and Galveston Bay. So here's a piece of satellite imagery depicting a couple of the Superfund sites. The particular one that's pretty well known is the San Jacinto River waste pits. It's sited right on water, and there are toxic dioxin plumes that the EPA put out a report and we went ahead and mapped. So that's what you're looking at here. Additionally, you see a lot of RV parks and residential areas along the waterway here on both sides. This is the river and the floodplain extent. And then the Harvey extent goes further, obviously. And so now we're looking at a time-lapse animation of some points in time where the San Jacinto River waste pits were inundated despite having some mitigation infrastructure on it there. So this area here is supposed to be the cap, and you can see right here, it's totally flooded in Harvey, obviously. But it wasn't just Harvey when it was, when the level of water and the river kind of encroached on that area. I'll let it pass through Harvey one more time. And there it is. So also mentioned in our conversation with the folks from this area was the French Limited site, which is a Superfund site near Crosby and Barrett. And there are residential households, about approximately 50, and 2 water wells within 1/2 mile of the French Limited site that we identified in just a fairly simple analysis here. This depicts the Harvey flood model, showing how it kind of all touches once it gets flooded. And then a similar time lapse here. You'll be able to see the changes in the extent of the water over time for the different flood events. And the Harvey one obviously is the most stark to look at. You can see water encroaching even more. And then the Harvey extent where the water's reaching right up into it. And that's not an isolated incident, so. This next one is a bunch of our data layers that's interactive that we're providing, where you can kind of zoom in and move the map around and see what is there, get some more information about the Superfund sites. And there's wells, 2 data sets of wells depicted here, which is something we discussed with the neighborhoods, that it's hard to find a single authoritative data set depicting all the wells, all groundwater wells. So we found one from TCEQ and one from Texas Water Development Board. So we provided them both here, and you can kind of compare and see which ones are from which and which cover which areas better or worse.
So next we're going to move over into an area northwest of Houston around Cypress. This is a Superfund site that is very different from what we were just looking at and very different from what we're going to look at in the Fifth Ward. As you can see in this map, we're not looking at a cluster of Superfund sites. It's pretty isolated. And that's because this is more of a neighborhood facility rather than the kinds of big industrial sites that I think we're more likely to think about with toxic releases. So this is in a pretty developed area surrounded by a lot of residential and neighborhood serving retail. It's a former dry cleaner in a strip mall that was active from the late 80s into the early 2000s. And it released a lot of a chemical known as PCE. And if you keep scrolling, oh, Amlon's going to talk about the plumes. Sorry.
Oh, no. I mean, I think we want to jump in here and say that a lot of this information we know that you know, probably way better than us. And I think what we're hoping to do here is to contextualize it and to bring in, say, historical data, trying to overlay the layers in case you see any correspondence, and try to have a resource where you could actually look at the plume, for example, not on a PDF isolated from another PDF or something like that, but have it all just in one image, and that might further help the investigations. So if you see around all these satellite images that we provided, we've done the quarter-mile radius and the half-mile around each Superfund site, just to give a sense of scale. You can look at the kind of number of buildings and where they are relative. These plumes were taken from, so THEA kindly shared with us like the kind of latest plume shapes, that because we were trying to work out what the plumes look like if there was any. And so what we've done is taken those documents and just trace them. And so you have them now in this interactive map that you can go and filter the layers. This is layers of PCE from testing in 2013, I believe. And this one, we're not 100% sure what the date of this well testing, this groundwater plume is, this bigger one. But, and you can see the source document on the right. You might have already seen that. But basically it shows that the plume is migrating. And I don't know if this is an EPA. I don't know if this is an EPA source or not, but so I think THEA could share more about maybe source, and then we could add that to the database. So everyone's got the same info, but here it is in the interactive map. The yellow sites are industrial, and we've taken an expanded notion of industrial, which includes kind of car parking lots, junkyards, things like that that you can also look at in the source material that we have. But you can basically zoom in and look at the building footprints in relation to the, I think you might be on a different part of the site, Mike, but yeah, it's a kind of interactive map. And if we scroll, so at the end, we'll show you that all these layers are actually in a web map. You can find not just like 3 or 4 of these layers together, but you can find all of them. You can turn on and off the wells, for example. So I don't know, Mike, if you want to zoom out a little bit and show where some of the wells are.
Yeah, it froze on me. I'm trying to get it to, oops.
And meanwhile, I might raise a really great point that Tom brought up in the chat just now about the toxic plumes do not respect political boundaries. And I think that's so right. So I think when we mention these sites and say, oh, this belongs to this neighborhood or so on, I think that's also misguided. It's just a way to point you to the site. But I think that's incredibly true once you start to see the flood risk overlays and things that just don't respect any of the kind of what we consider to be the kind of contained parcel or the contained neighborhood that doesn't really exist. So yeah, we totally share that thought, Tom. And so, okay, if we kind of scroll through, yeah, so that if you click on one of the blue dots, we've brought together two types of groundwater well data sets, because we've heard from residents that they can be misleading. One set may not have all the wells that the other set has. So we have from the Texas Water Development Board, as well as the Texas Commission, the TCEQ, in this data set. Okay, so yeah, we can potentially zoom to the next thing. And so this is the kind of third site. So this is all, again, based on the discussions we had with these community members, and I believe it was maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And looking back at the layers again. So again, land cover is mainly high impervious surface. You can notice the shapes of the Englewood Yard, the Union Pacific, which is pretty impervious, as well as the kind of industrial buildup along the bayous. And we might zoom in on one of the, it's a former Superfund site, the Bear Street site. And we brought this in because of one of the residents mentioned it, that, you know, these sites, once they're taken off the list, they're usually thought of as no longer a threat. But for many residents, it's it's still kind of lurking concern, the toxicity and what they've done on the site. So this is a pretty big site, a former foundry. And if you scroll down, we have, again, the Harvey model showing that overlapping onto the site itself. And this is a historical time lapse showing, you know, the site's development before when it was a foundry, and you can see some of the machinery and industry there, and how it's developed. And I think there were plans for residential development on the site. And so this kind of speaks to kind of the question of industrial memory, like how much do we remember about the sites that were formerly toxic or formerly industrial, and yeah, how, you know, how kind of maybe you know, future development might actually cover over these kind of earlier toxic histories. So I think that's really all with this image. Further up north, west, along the freeway, we have, I think you're quite familiar with the North and South Cavalcade Superfund sites. And we wanted to put in also the Jensen Drive scrap, which is a state Superfund, as well as recently removed former Superfund Houston scrap. And they're all coalesced here between the north side and Kashmir Gardens. And so if you scroll down, you'll see again the Fema outlines. And I think this is trying to show that proximity and the spillover of flood risk. Again, like floods don't respect political boundaries. They might follow highway lines, for example, but there are kind of, if you scroll down again, you'll notice that the Hurricane Harvey model really transgresses that and gets, you know, pretty close to some of this, the active Superfunds. And lastly, we wanted to add, because of the discussions that we had, wanted to add the Union Pacific rail yard site. It's not currently a Superfund or a registered TRI, a registered Superfund site, but we thought that because it was so top of mind to some residents that we would include the buffers. So you can see here, quarter mile and half mile again, its proximity to residential and schools and churches within that buffer, and also drawing from the documents of the creosote plume that THEA shared with us. We went ahead and traced that as well. So you can see that here, and overlaid onto the satellite imagery. If you scroll down, we've also found the arsenic plume information, which you can find a link to here. And we've tried to incorporate that into the map as well. So you have those layers. And yeah, so I think this question of water and groundwater and the different layers, starts to break down the idea of the boundary to the north. If you scroll down further, Mike, yeah, again, you'll see that Fema floodplain, the lighter being the 500-year floodplain and the darker being the 100-year. And again, when you go through, you'll see the Harvey model kind of cover way more than what we saw. So this is not, this is just kind of painting that flood risk again. And we've included these building footprints to contextualize. They're done by the Spatial Studies Lab, and they're from 2018. So they're not exactly up to date, and they may be historical accumulations of footprints. But I think what it does show is that historically the land use, pink being residential, purple being commercial, and you can see the parks in green and the schools and public institutions in yellow, orange, I mean. It starts to provide that granularity of how that interface along the sites kind of come right up to the edge, especially where the toxic plume overlaps into the community. So yeah, that I think adds more context. And this is the ditch layer with Harvey simulation and the plumes, just to show that there is a proximity also to the question of ditches, which I think we had the kind of broader discussion on earlier. I think that's really great. And thinking through what it might mean if you did have the open ditches next to a site like this. And so that's what this map kind of brings together. And here are the drainage types added into the interactive map, which you've seen before. So I think we can explore that in your own time. The sites and the kind of half-mile and quarter-mile buffers are in there as well. And yeah, you can zoom in and out of these as well. So, I mean, I think that's really it. We're trying to really just pull the resources that we found together into a legible database, a kind of visual one where you can click around and turn layers on and off, especially in your area when you zoom in, and see if there are any congruences or overlaps in concerns. So Mike will run you through this part of the public web map.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? So I'll show that again. Here, the access to the interactive map link is here. And when it opens, you get a little splash window here with some instructions that I'm just gonna walk you through quickly. So you hit okay. And we have some of the layers displayed automatically here that you may recognize from earlier in the presentation, but the entire layer list is up here in the top left, and all the layers that we presented to you today are available here. And all you have to do is toggle the little eyeball icons for visibility, and you get to look at the different variables. And this is all interactive, so you can zoom in and find your neighborhood and turn the different layers on and off here. So looking at TRI facilities, the Superfund locations, and all the data is available underneath it here with these nice little pop-ups. If you get in too close and you don't know where you are and you get lost, there's also this little home button here on the left that'll bring you right back out to all of Harris County. So the legend is the second button in here as well. So the map is pretty easy to navigate once you get used to it. But and like I said, all the layers that we presented today are available here. There's actually a pretty substantial amount. So if you do have a bunch of the layers loaded and it starts to freeze up on you, like we said, just go ahead and refresh your browser. But they're all available here for your exploration as well. And Emma, I think that's it, right?
That's it. Yeah. Do we want to click on the link to the sources, just so we know?
Yes. Also here is a list of data sources. So you can see where each and every one of the data sets that we've displayed comes from.
Yeah, this is organized in the sequence of the map. So you could follow along as you scroll through. And for any view that you're looking at in the story map, you should be able to see every layer that is shown on the map at that time and its sources.
Right, and the main sections have their little bookmarks up here. So if you wanted to go back and look at some of the variables across Harris County, you can click here. If you want to look at Fifth Ward specifically, that helps you navigate that. And then that's where these kind of sections correspond to, just to help you navigate a little bit.
Great, so maybe we can, with 10 minutes to go, we might share that link to both the web map and also the kind of, the story map that you've just seen and the public map with all the layers. And we can, open up to your thoughts and discussions. We totally understand that this is not a kind of, this is everyone's experience of Harris County. This is everyone's experience of the neighborhood. We completely agree that there are so many variables. But I think when we started looking for these data sets and found, and started to accrue all these layers of information and started wondering what it might all mean when we collapsed them together, what was flooding, where the wells were, how far away is something from another. I think that's really our aim, is not so much to tell you this is what it is or this is not, because that's something that you know way more than us, and we could never be that voice. This is really just a kind of mapping resource for THEA and for you to navigate and investigate in the locations that you know so well, and have it in a visual way, so that it's not pages and pages of text from the EPA, but something accessible. So thanks so much for listening to us, that we can open it up to discussion.
Well, okay. I would just like to first say, great on layering everything so you can see it all together, because you lose so much information when you're flipping from screen to screen. So thank you for that.
Yeah, we agree. We struggled with that too when we were looking from one plume to the next, and we had no idea what was, how big or small something was. So in the GIS map space, you can, scale everything relative.
Well, not only that, when you're flipping from screen to screen, like and in between agencies, as you got it in the dot form, such as the water wells, some of them are in close proximity. So where you think you're seeing it once, you may actually be seeing it twice. On your map, you can actually tell there's two. But also I would like to ask, all this good work, who all are y'all sharing it with? Are you sharing it with different agencies?
So we've been working with effectively THEA, you guys, and this is the first time we've ever shared this map and this data set. The other database that some of these layers might go into is the Rice University highways and waterways database, which they're trying to understand kind of the different layers of Houston as well. But the only organization that we've been working with is THEA, and that's how we managed to get in touch with residents and kind of, yeah, expand.
This is Lisa Gossett, just confirming that this is publicly available so we can start sharing it.
Yes, the map, the story map, I don't know, Mike and Ray could tell you a bit more about this.
Okay.
We've never trialed like 100 people logging onto the map at the same time, so we don't know what that might do to it. It's quite long and, you know, with lots of images, but yeah, I think once the link is up, oh, the link is up now, Ray's just posted it. And if you scroll all the way down, if you want to cut through the story and go straight to the layers, you can just go to that very last page and click on that public web map link Mike was talking about, and all the layers are on there. So yes, you can go ahead and share it. We also have the sources, which we mentioned earlier, if you ever want to figure out where we got something from.
Now this is a fabulous resource. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, if you're having any problems with scrolling down through the story map, like I said, go ahead and refresh the browser and use the bookmarks as best you can. We have the RICE servers and infrastructure behind it, but they're not, you know, it's not Google behind this either. So just bear with it. There is a lot of data here, as you saw, but should be all available.
Sorry, I think we might have, I'm just now looking at the chat again. Have we missed any questions, or if you'd like to re-ask it, please do. And yeah, we think that one thing that's often missing from this kind of information is the kind of narrative component, the voices of people, and maybe this is something, THEA, we want to ask as well. We've dropped in the quotes from residents, and if they don't want the quotes published, we can take them off as well. But we haven't. We've made it anonymous. But just to contextualize like the stories. So let me know if that's a thing. But I think that one thing when we were looking through, and maybe Ray and Mike can reflect as well a little bit, the spreadsheets of like how many pounds, how many thousand pounds, how many million pounds of toxic contaminants like going into this one waterway or all the waterways. It was hard to visualize that, especially over time. So what Ray created with the time slider, where you can hit play and see literally like over time the hotspots, I think that was something that took a little while, but helped make for us as well, like make us better understand really what the data was saying, because it's all public. You could go on the TRI website by the EPA and download all the spreadsheets for every year. But the next step would be to bring it into a visual.
Two questions. It was hard to see all the information that was on your spreadsheets, but for those of us on the amounts, is there also the, I guess you would say, sort of a crazy notion, the safer levels? What's in relation to what should be not a problem to what is actually this big old huge number that's out here? Is there a comparison there so that you know the levels that how they compare?
That's a really good question. And unfortunately, we didn't get into that level of detail. What you don't see on the map is that for each of those bubbles, there were dozens and dozens of chemical releases for many of those dots. So even for the ones where it's carcinogenic, it might be 10 different carcinogens. The spreadsheet that that there's a link to that you can click on, it does say the specific chemicals that go into specific waterways, but we don't have it because it's not part of the EPA data set, and it was a bit outside of our realm of expertise to do that research on each chemical. But I think you've pointed out a really significant gap in what the data provides and what would actually be useful to have.
Yeah, because
not a gap that we felt.
Yeah, as just a normal citizen, not with a degree in all of these chemicals and stuff, to know if, you know, this many parts per billion is a safe level or a toxic level. I mean, we can assume when you see a huge number, you're at a toxic label, but in comparison to what should be a safe level, how, you know, so you can judge, not just in your mind, but a visual, how bad is it?
Yeah, Carolyn, I would somewhat answer that. They're limited by the data that they can access and include. So one of the weaknesses with the toxic release inventory is it reports in pounds of a very large list of chemicals. And some of those chemicals are much more toxic than others. Right. And there's a limit to how much that could be brought into a map like this. Also, they are reported on an annual basis. So you don't know if it happens all at once or over a period of time. But this is a tremendous resource in really getting a lot of information in one place.
Oh, I'm not arguing that at all. I think it's
amazing.
Yeah,
but
I think
there's so much information we don't know still. And each project like this just gets us one step closer to having a better understanding of what we know and what we don't know.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's great. Like I said, putting it all together in one spot is great. I mean, it's so much more useful than looking at 10 different pages of things and trying to remember from one page to the other what was on the first page. So this is all here. This is great. I was just wondering if that was included in there, because I couldn't read it. It was way too tiny for me. And I was just wondering if that was also in there. And then my other question is, as far as the zoom factor, how close in can you zoom? Can you zoom right to a street, or is it further back out to, like, say, community? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, you should be able to zoom pretty far in to the street level.
It's Reverend Caldwell. Yeah, I think the program itself, being able to utilize the tool is essential. A lot of things. Well, first of all, let me address the question in the chat. Yeah, that used to be an elementary school there. Yeah, it was Bruce Elementary, and that now there is development on that property now. Developers have begun building on that site as we speak.
Like right now, they're constructing.
As we speak, there are currently some that have already been completed and some in the process. So, you know, and we're still not certain as to the toxicity of the ground or the water in that area.
I don't know, did you plan some area?
Secondly, we talked about the regulations or something like that. The EPA and various administrations change the regulations from time to time. So that can change. Of course, we know as far as what toxin levels are and what they should exceed and what they should not exceed. Different administrations change that. And that's what occurred during previous administrations. Some things were changed. You know, so in addressing that, you're going to have to be able to, like I say, the documentation is good. Over a period of time, you get facts, you get data, but you don't get the impact. You know, those who are affected by those data and those facts that you occur. And, you know, most of the time these are incurred in communities of color. You know, I hate to use this, it's almost sounds redundant, underserved, neglected communities, but it's more than just that. There's income inequality, there's no economic growth, all of the above. But we have to look at once we acquire the data and the information, then we have to look at the impact, those who are actually being affected by what we're reading as far as the data. And I think Melon, hopefully I pronounced it right, mentioned earlier that, they didn't go into that aspect of it. But what you did provide is that tool to help document and help provide the facts and proof that what these communities have been saying and others like them is true. It is true. Having to deal with, EPA regulations, TCEQ regulations, all of the above are obstacles that communities have to address and confront, but the data speaks for itself. You don't have to prove that. The long-term effect of being in these communities, I think said something went back for so many years, I think it was 2007. What about 1997? They were still there. What about 87? Yeah, and things of that nature. What is the overall cumulative impact, that we can see now? That may be for, other entities to address, not necessarily you guys, but we have to be willing to see the big picture. We have the data, we know what it says, and I'm inclined to agree with what the other lady just spoke of. What does that data mean? What does it mean to me if I live in this community? Should I be frightened? Should I do something? Should I wear a mask? When there's a spill or a high reading on one of these monitors, something like that, what kind of impact did that have on me? If I'm a pregnant mother, will that affect my child? Will that affect my child now in going to the elementary school that's 2 blocks away from the chemical plant? What does these things mean? We have the data and having the impact, but understanding the data, or not necessarily understanding, relating that to a community so that they understand the impact that it is having. We talk about benzene and all these other, PM 2.5 and all these other chemical components.
No, thank you so much, James. Oh, sorry, did you have?
No, I was done. What's the impact, of that? But no, the tool is great. The tool is fantastic. As a matter of fact, I was going to ask for a copy of it.
Yeah, so I don't know if you have the link to the public map, the story map, and then also the public web map with all the layers on it, but you can access it from your computer. So we're very aware that we're not kind of scientists or doctors, but I think what we would try to do, we can visualize things and make things clear on a page. And so what we hope this map, it's called a story map, when you scroll and it tells the story, and you can actually sit with, if someone else from a different discipline and you show them the maps, and maybe there could be that nuance, that discussion around, hey, this is the amount of toxins I'm seeing in this site or coming from this facility. Is that okay or not? And someone who can also read the map. So it's more of, I think we're hoping that allows communication between people that could have maybe been more difficult if you were just given some numbers or you didn't know where it was on the map or things like that. So I think definitely there's a huge amount of work that can be done to take the data and the information and interpret it in the critical medical way, which I totally agree with.
Well, you can take that data to the decision makers, the policy makers,
right,
about that change. And that's what the data and the information being provided is instrumental, because you take that to elected officials, policymakers, those who make those choices and decisions and vote on these issues, and put that data before them to prove, not to argue, but to prove your point. And you know, EPA along with TCEQ and other entities are measuring these things.
I think I'm about done.
It helps support them. Helps support them.
Thank you.
I have, with him mentioning that location was now being developed, wouldn't it be a great opportunity to start a study of that area to see how are the effects of that area on the incoming residents, the people who are going to be using that development? If you start monitoring them or trying to get permission from them to allow you to monitor them for a several year period and see how it relates, and especially with the mapping and everything, because it's kind of like, not that it's virgin ground, maybe virgin use at the moment, incoming new use.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carolyn. So that's a great suggestion. It's definitely not something that we have the expertise to do. I think what, again, the map could do, particularly if it's shared within the academic community as well as the public, that there are researchers who do this kind of work with in sociology and so on, and they take on projects that kind of interact with participants over time. So I think that there could be kind of possibilities there once the kind of stories reach researchers who can do that work. But I am also aware that we want to respect everyone's time. I don't know, Lisa, Rachel, Christine, if you want to close or wrap up or have any final comments.
Just want to say thanks again. This was a great presentation, and for everyone that attended, thank you for coming out and hearing the presentation and seeing it. Appreciate the hard work, and we'll be in touch with the link as well. Good. Lisa, anything else you want to say?
No, thank you very much. It's a great project, and I'm looking forward to using it. Exploring it a little bit more now that I know where to find it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for
thank you, everybody.
Yeah, for partnering with us, and yeah, I think we've learned so much from you as well. So thank you, and we'll be in touch about maybe like some static maps that we can print and send it to you.
Thank you for all the links. I've copied them and pasted them into Word so I don't lose them, and that they're properly copied.
I have a quick question. Will this recording be available for us too, for a period of time? Because yes. I'm traveling, and so I'm on a phone, and so it was really difficult for me to see or understand what I was looking at on the maps.
Yes, Ms. Joy, we recorded the meeting, and we'll have it available.
Okay, thank you, because I'd like to be able to listen to the entire presentation with your explanations. That way I can follow what I'm looking at.
No problem.
Thank you.
Okay, we was down this street here.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.